My sister and I magically went back to 1980, right to the day good old Mom and Dad were setting us up for blind dates. This time, my sister was crying and begging our folks to set her up with some laid-off worker. She whispered to me with this smug look on her face, "Sis, this time I get the luxury life and you're stuck with the poverty god." But she had no idea that before the wedding even happened, her new husband handed me control of all the finances. I couldn't help but laugh as I happily got her hitched. This wasn't some bankrupt poverty god, it was more like the god of wealth. Last time I saw my sister was at the hospital. My husband and I walked in with fancy nutritional supplements, like a whole entourage with 7 or 8 servants behind us turning heads. The hospital director even came out to greet us. All our relatives crowded around, showering us with flattery and check-ins, completely ignoring my poor sister lying on the bed after a miscarriage. Suddenly, my mom blurted out wishing she hadn't let Anna marry that entrepreneur. Then she shot me a quick look, squeezing my sister's hand tightly. Everyone started talking about her, lamenting her bad luck, saying she was broke within 5 years, and now in her midlife losing a child and her health. It was like she had no future left. I glanced at my sister. She looked pale and was staring at me with such resentment in her eyes. Before we left, she grabbed me, saying she hadn't bought new clothes in ages and wanted to check out the stuff at the mall I owned. Everyone laughed. Seeing her bruised hands, I couldn't just leave her hanging and agreed to take her. After shopping, just as I was dropping her home, she knocked me out and tried to kill us both by turning on the gas. In those final moments, I saw her raising a lighter, yelling like crazy, "Emily, why do you get to be the rich wife? You stole my life. Die. Let's both die. No one gets to be happy." After a massive explosion, searing pain engulfed me, and I blacked out. When I opened my eyes again, I was sitting in a room. I heard my sister screaming hysterically outside, "No way. I won't marry this bad luck charm. Mom, I'd rather die than marry him." I peeked through the door crack and saw her, face red, gesturing frantically at the guy on the couch. Her face had this weird smile, all twisted like she'd just gone through some major emotional roller coaster. It hit me, my sister had come back in time too. And this time, she wanted to swap lives with me. Ridiculous. My dad, fuming, jumped up to apologize to the guy. Why apologize? That guy's nuts. Meanwhile, my mom tried to cover my sister's mouth but failed as she kicked free. She glared hatefully at our mom, "If you force me to marry him, I might as well die." My mom looked stunned, glancing back and forth between my sister and the guy on the couch, not knowing what to say. My sister took the chance, kneeling dramatically before our dad, all tears and snot on her face, begging not to be forced into a wolf's den. Dad was just frozen for a moment, and I was silently laughing inside. Wasn't she the one desperate to marry him in the first place? We grew up dirt poor, and after a flood, we were virtually left with nothing. Even so, she was always the one who loved dressing up and also the one our parents favored the most. Dad had arranged for her to meet someone from a steel factory, Gary. But she turned her nose up, finding him too plain and lacking sophistication. Then she met Leo, who had some family wealth, and cried to marry him. Just then, the steel factory laid off workers, making Gary jobless and my sister scornful, refusing to acknowledge any engagement with him. "Anna, it's not that I don't agree, but Leo's divorced." Mom stepped in, and under her persuasion, Dad agreed. With Gary out of a job, he couldn't let her suffer. He swallowed his pride and proposed to Leo's family. "Your sister has a point, we have to give an answer." Fast forward to the next day, Mom took me to meet Gary. Gary's parents weren't thrilled, but Gary didn't have work, and I wasn't highly educated, so they didn't have much choice. But Gary is jobless. Won't Anna suffer? I stared coldly at Dad. "So, you're not worried about me suffering?" I refused. "That guy looks alright now, but 5 years from now, he'll be bankrupt, and he's got issues, he can hardly conceive. Even if you have a kid, it won't survive." But Dad didn't originally like Leo. Now that I was doing what he wanted, why's it a no-go again? Finally, my sister started spewing nonsense. Everyone, even the man seated, was stunned. Dad turned red, Mom was about to blow a fuse, but I wasn't surprised. The last time, after just a few years of marriage, she kept coming home, ranting about Leo's shortcomings, that he couldn't satisfy her in bed, and hardly spoke to her. As time went on, she felt more and more frustrated, finding Leo was nothing but an empty shell compared to the strong, hard-working Gary from the steel factory. Eventually, Gary skyrocketed to real estate mogul status, while she saw Leo as worthless. There were even rumors of Leo's domestic abuse, claiming the child she lost wasn't his but a result of an affair, which he violently caused to miscarry. She crawled over to Dad, with a soft voice, "Dad, after all this, marrying Leo wouldn't end well for me. I'd rather marry Gary. Can't I just go ahead with that?" Dad looked at her, shaking his head in resignation. After bending over backward to arrange this match, who could imagine Leo would agree and she'd suddenly refuse? "Leo, maybe we take a rain check?" "Dad, we've already accepted his gifts. We owe him an explanation." My sister didn't even realize this awkwardness was on her, and upon seeing Dad budge, she jumped up. "Why doesn't my sister step in and marry him instead?" "Shut up. You promised, not her, she's not fooling anyone." Dad whipped around. Unexpectedly, my sister, with complete disrespect, pointed at my door and said, "My sister's 2 years older than me, why can't she marry?" "Dad, we can't possibly afford to return their gifts, can we? Don't listen to a child's nonsense." "Leo?" Before Dad could finish, Leo stood up. "You know, any guy would probably lose it if someone said he wasn't good in that department." I'm kinda shocked Leo only just walked out. But when he spoke, none of us saw it coming. He said, "Since they're all your daughters, there's no deceit." After he left, I couldn't help but pop into my sister's room. Caught her humming, trying on clothes in front of the mirror. I asked softly, "Are you really gonna marry Gary? He's an unemployed dude with no money." Just wanted to give her a heads up, but she got super triggered. She pushed me down hard, her eyes filled with hate. "Emily, you've been living the rich life long enough. It's my turn now. You better just marry that poor guy. Try anything sneaky, and I'll make life hell for you." I looked at her calmly, feeling her grip on my neck getting tighter. "Fine, if you want my life so bad, it's yours. Just hope you don't cry for a trade later." When I agreed, she let go and sneered, "I thought you were tough stuff, but you're just good at marrying. So what if you went to school? I'm prettier, and Gary will treat me better." On the wedding day, she shot me a challenging look. "Emily, let me give you a tip. Leo's gonna be broke in 5 years. Then you'll have to watch your own back." Seeing her hop into that wedding car, I just smiled a little. A woman with no skills, marrying an unemployed guy with extra mouths to feed in the 80s? Good luck making ends meet. And just like last time, Gary threw a big wedding for Anna. Everyone knew how he treated her like a queen. Their playful laughs were the talk of the town. Proof of Gary's love for her. Unlike last time, when I couldn't have a baby, Anna soon had a big belly. She returned home, leaning on Gary. Just like before, Gary made good money with a rented cargo truck and unemployment benefits. When Anna saw me, she was so smug. "Sis, I suffered last lifetime without bugging you. This time you won't ruin my peace." I nodded. Why get involved in their mess? My good days were just getting started. I was planning to move in with Leo. Unlike Anna and Gary, Leo and I went to the marriage office on a day he was free and got our marriage license. No wedding, no family there. Right after, Leo rushed back to his pig farm, making Anna even cockier. She figured I was doomed. Then came the turning point from my last life. Back then, after high school, I got a chance to study in another city. But my sister flaked on marrying Leo, and I had to marry Gary instead. My mom locked me up without a word. This time, I nervously showed my admission letter to Leo. Didn't expect him to hand me a key right away. I've got a place in that city for delivery. You can stay there. I'll send your living expenses with the deliveries. Use these for now. He pressed a wad of crumpled cash in my hand. It was a few $100, a fortune for me. I was ready to sneak off to register if Leo said no. Unlike Gary's place, Leo had no family watching me like a hawk. It felt like hitting the jackpot. As I stood in front of the school, it seemed unreal until I sat at my desk. That's when I knew my new life had begun. Emily, have you heard? Some punks hang around the school gate harassing girls. I kept my head down, scribbling away. After school, a guy with dyed hair called me out. I frowned. I knew him, Mark, Gary's brother, my ex-brother-in-law from the last life. He had a cigarette in his mouth, a bunch of shady guys with him, leering at me. Then came a loud shout from afar, Mark. What are you doing? There was my long-lost sister, glaring at me with bloodshot eyes and gritted teeth. Noticing my indifference, she angrily gestured, lips moving without sound, no doubt warning me to stay clear. Mark noticed her too, and he strutted off with his crew. Seeing him walk away, I went the opposite direction, unfazed. If Mark's here too, Anna's life won't be smooth sailing. Soon, she dragged Mark to my school, confronting me with wild accusations. Emily. Have you no shame? Can't get the big one, so you go for the younger? Interest piqued, I watched her. By her logic, I must have done something shameless to make Mark praise me repeatedly to his brother. She acted like she owned both brothers. Mark casually chewed his cigarette, now and then winking at me, making Anna fume. She snatched my bag, dumped everything out. Just pens and books, which she angrily tore up. I frowned at her tantrum, wondering how to explain those were meant for recycling. Tearing them up made them worthless. A passerby couldn't stand it. Oh, come on, let the girl study. Teach her about dating, don't be harsh. That made me chuckle out loud. Honestly, Anna's holding up better than me in my past life. I've been stuck in the classroom for months now, hardly seeing the sun and not doing any chores. Gary's mom always believed that men doing chores brings bad luck. Back in my previous life, even when I had a fever, I'd get up in the middle of the night to take care of a drunk Gary. Probably, pregnant Anna is doing the same. Over time, it's not just that you feel worn out, you look drained too. Combine that with her current attitude, and she's nothing like the sweet 18 or 19-year-old girl she once was. You old hag, why are you poking around? She shot a glare at the lady, yanking Mark's arm and pointing at me. Mark, I'll find you someone better. We need to stay far away from women who are just trash, cheating with other men. Mark just nodded quietly, giving me a glance. Only then did she stomp off, still muttering. Once they were gone, the lady figured it out too, helping me pick up the rest of my books. She talked so nasty, and you didn't say a word. Make sure to study hard, better days are ahead, you hear? Thanks. I said, slinging my backpack over my shoulder. Was it cowardice that kept me from speaking up? Not really. Mark's teasing and Anna's insults couldn't shake me. As long as I don't get tangled up in their mess, I can endure anything. I know from experience that Mark likes strong-willed women. He enjoys playing the innocent, relying on these women's protective instincts, then tearing them apart. He thrives on the thrill of the hunt. Anna doesn't realize it yet, but she's setting herself up for disaster. Another month later, Anna cornered me at the school gates. This time she wasn't in a fit. She seemed crushed, like something bad had happened. She dragged me into an alley. Emily. What did you do? Is there something you're hiding from me? Her question threw me off. Then I noticed red marks on her neck and earlobes. What's that about? I asked, suspicious. Avoiding her swelling belly, I thought it odd. Gary should have been back at the family farm by now. Is it you and Mark? No. She shook her head quickly. He's just curious. Guys, you know. I furrowed my brow. Gary is supposed to be the father of her baby. I wouldn't be surprised if Mark crossed lines with others, but his brother too. Unless Anna got tempted by the young Mark after marrying Gary, which seems to be backfiring now. Emily, you knew, didn't you? She fumed. What's knowing going to change? Haven't you been married? Pregnant? Don't you know men that age have a lot of energy? Mark's in his late 20s and hasn't married yet. If he's constantly hearing the gossip at home, it's easy for things to spiral out of control. She paused, then, realizing something, she lunged at me, screaming, "No way. Did you tell him something? He wasn't always like this." Like what? I pressed. Is it the fact that when you tried to cheat before, one took your risque photos, and the other almost sued you? In our past, not only did Gary rise to be a real estate mogul because of me, but Mark also became a top lawyer with his own firm. Anna screeched, tightening her grip on my neck, "Shut up. Why can you juggle them both, and I can't?" Well, I coughed, meeting her glare, "It's because you want everything, so you end up with nothing." She staggered back, "You're talking nonsense, Emily." I knew I hit a nerve. Let Gary take you home and get your life back on track. Don't let the desire for future riches blind you to the creeping evil around you. You're nothing. Leo's never home, so you hold on to an empty house. I bet I can do what you can. Just wait. One day, you'll crawl to me like a dog. Without Gary, I wasn't much, she hissed, walking off. Her words weighed down my heart. Anna's determination for a good life means she'll do anything to torment me. Now with Leo gone and the three of them, Gary, Mark, and Anna, as a threat, it seems my good days here are numbered. On my way home, I flashed back to last time. Gary left early for the farm and told me to wait for Mark's worksite to close. Instead, that night, he brought over a group of thugs and joked, "Check my sister-in-law out, stunning, right?" While he left, I was dragged to a room. They locked the door, and I slammed against it, yelling, "Help! Someone help!" I could hear Mark's casual voice from outside the door, "Emily, they're just looking for some fun. They won't do anything. Besides, my brother isn't around, I'll keep it secret for you." Those thugs stood behind me, watching with interest as I pounded on the door. Some of them were already loosening their belts, grinning wickedly as they reached for me. Terrified, I screamed, "Mark, your brother won't let you get away with this when he returns." But no matter how much I screamed as those thugs dragged me back into the room by my hair, the door never opened. Gary, trying to save money, had rented a place in the suburbs. It meant no one could hear me even if I screamed my lungs out. I was tossed back into the bedroom like livestock. They pinned down my arms and legs, while another one pressed down hard on me, tearing at my clothes, his hands roaming over my body. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming despair. Later, I struggled frantically and bit a chunk off one of them, then pushed open the window and jumped from the third floor. Luckily, it wasn't too high, and I landed on a bike shed below. But when I limped down the road, crying, those beasts were riding motorcycles, following me, laughing close behind. They threatened to drag me back if I stopped. Driven by a desperate will to live, I ran for nearly 3 hours until I found a patrolling officer. When Gary came to pick me up at the station, he ignored my plight and slapped me instead. "You dare report to the police after cheating on me? Afraid others won't find out, huh?" I clutched my face, at a loss. I saw Mark and those thugs standing not far behind him. The one I bit spat in my direction and stomped on his cigarette but with force. Gary kept on yelling, "Now I know why we can't have kids. You've been ruined by other men. I'll beat you to death." He kicked me hard, venting all his frustrations from years of unemployment on me relentlessly. I lay motionless on the ground. He got scared because we were close to the station, and he had me taken to the hospital. He kept cursing, "Worthless woman, costing me money." While I was in the hospital, I sneaked back home. Only to find out the keys had been changed. When I called them, all I got was, "Get out. How can a married daughter keep coming back? Don't come again." But I could hear my sister laughing inside, and Leo's car for her parked downstairs. So it wasn't about a married daughter being away. They feared Gary's poverty, thinking he might ask them for money. "Dad, Mom," I called in despair. They didn't know Gary's place was a den of beasts. Now even my parents wouldn't accept me. It's like I was their biggest burden, marrying me off to finally rid themselves of me. That day, I stood downstairs for ages until I saw Anna being sent off in her car by our parents. The door to what I called home was shut on me forever. The last shred of hope in my heart died. I realized that from now on, I could only rely on myself. That night, I bought a cleaver and went to the construction site where Mark worked. In the shed, he was drinking heavily with the thug from that day. They weren't afraid when they saw me, pulling my hand to his lap. I raised the cleaver and swung it towards his groin, shocking him awake in a cold sweat. The knife lodged deep into the stool. "Are you crazy?" He grabbed a folding chair and swung it at me, enraged. Blood streamed down my forehead, but I didn't flinch, ready to swing again. The thug next to him, still groggy from liquor, tried to grab me. I picked up a brick from the ground and smashed it over his head. Maybe they'd drunk too much. Soon Mark and the thug fell to the ground. This time Gary quickly arrived with that gang of thugs and started banging on the door. I tightened the ropes around Mark and the thug, then poured a can of gasoline over them. He screamed in terror. I shushed him with an eerie smile. "It's just for fun, right? You said you'd keep it secret, didn't you?" "Yes, let me go, Emily." He begged with a forced smile, thinking it a joke. Outside, they were discussing how to break down the door. I silently raised a lighter, and that's when Mark finally shouted in fear, "Don't come in. Stay out." The police arrived that day thanks to Gary calling them. Before they could ask anything, the thugs tried to sneak away. Turns out, the red-haired leader was a fugitive. Inside the precinct, the thugs caved and confessed everything about what they did. The police were sympathetic about my situation, though it had been too intense. I was detained for a while. Years later, Mark admitted I terrified him that day. What I didn't tell him was, had Gary not called the police, I'd have lit that gasoline when they burst in. That incident spread my fierce reputation far and wide, and the reward for reporting the fugitive surprisingly opened doors for me in business and prosperity. But this life, Anna revived that beast herself and chose to turn a blind eye. What's waiting for her is an even darker abyss. Just entering the complex, Anna blocked me. Behind her were those same thugs. I clenched my fists and asked, "Anna, what are you doing?" "I've thought it through. Even if you're married to Leo, as long as you're alive, you might seduce Gary." She sneered. "So, I have a gift for you." She clapped her hands, and the thugs surged forward, cornering me. The red-haired leader played with a folding knife, sizing me up. "Is it her?" Anna's face showed a malicious grin. "Yes, make sure she's well taken care of. I'll pay you each time. Round after round." "Anna." I instinctively looked around. "Don't bother, you can't escape today." She retreated while holding her belly. "Emily, you should thank me. Your husband is infertile. If they knock you up with a kid or two, you'll beg to thank me." With that, the red-haired thug lunged at me, and in panic, I kicked him right where it hurt. A few of the thugs didn't expect me to fight back, so they froze for a second. I took the chance to push one aside and ran out. Just as I spotted the security guard, a hand suddenly covered my mouth and threw me to the side. "You filthy girl, trying to run? Go on, run." Red Hair was the first to catch up and he started kicking me hard. The others quickly followed, pinning down my limbs. Just as he pulled down his pants, the beam of a flashlight hit his face. Then the piercing sound of police sirens rang out, scaring the thugs into running in all directions. Leo rushed over, kicked red hair to the ground, and helped me up. "You okay?" he asked, worried. When I saw him, my heart finally settled. The first time I saw Mark, I told Leo. So lately, he had told the security guard to keep an extra eye on anyone around me. Just now when I entered the community, it was the guard who, under the pretense of giving me a letter, told me someone was following me. So I called the cops ahead of time, just waiting for them to show up. Just like in my past life, Red Hair's fugitive status was exposed, leading to his arrest. In that moment, the injustice from my past life mixed with the thrill of revenge in this one, making me dive into Leo's arms, tears streaming down my face. He awkwardly hugged me and asked, "What's wrong? Are you hurt? Let me see." I shook my head. But Leo wasn't assured, and insisted on taking me to the hospital for a checkup. Luckily, those kicks from Red Hair didn't hurt any internal organs or bones. I'd be fine in a few weeks. Back home, he held me in bed and was about to head to the couch. I grabbed his hand and asked, "Aren't you supposed to be away?" Usually, close to the end of the year, Leo would go off to collect debts, which is why Anna picked this time to mess with me. "Knowing you might be in danger, how could I let you be alone?" He squeezed my hand, a bright look in his eyes. As our eyes met, I suddenly felt an unfamiliar flutter in my heart. Something real and new. Maybe Leo felt it too, as he suddenly pulled his hand back and took out an envelope from his pocket, handing it to me. When I opened it, I almost dropped it in shock. It was filled with money. He said apologetically, "I didn't manage to collect from many places, just this. Use it for now." Joy surged through me. It was almost $1,000. Thinking about Anna calling him poor, I felt like running back to give her a piece of my mind. "She doesn't know what she's talking about, he's like the god of wealth." Maybe my expression startled him. He quickly pulled out a ledger from his pocket to show me. But his hand slipped, and the notebook fell to the floor. On the open page were numerous scribbles of Emily, my name. I looked up at him in disbelief, only to see his tight lips and flushed ears. Page after page had my name written somewhere. I thought he was as indifferent as Anna said. Now I saw he was just deeply and silently in love. After what happened, I applied for an exchange student program at school. When I got accepted, Mom came to me, desperately grabbing my hand. "Emily, you have to save your sister." Then I learned that after Red Hair got caught, his gangster buddies, thinking Anna set them up, burst into Gary's place in a drunken rage and tortured Anna for nearly 8 hours in front of him. When the police arrived, Anna lay in a bloody mess, barely alive, and Gary had a broken leg. It was said that at the scene, the sheets and her clothing were soaked in blood and torn in pieces. A doctor had to work hard to remove all foreign objects from her body. The baby was gone too. Doctors said that even if she wakes up, she'd be stuck with a bag for life. "How will your sister live like that?" My mom cried. I watched quietly. Growing up, she always loved my sister more than me. In my past life, when Anna spread word about my near assault, Leo hadn't gone bankrupt yet, and Gary was still just a truck driver. The rape, even after success and fame, stayed as a stain on me. My parents knew the truth but never stood up for me. If asked, they mumbled something like "flies don't bother eggs without cracks." No one knew how on the day Red Hair was arrested, I sat rigid in the police car until I vomited blood. In the hospital, my body was stitched up nearly everywhere. The doctors said it was a miracle I survived. Yet there was my mom, blaming me from the bedside. "Why did you cause a scene? Now everyone knows you almost got raped. How can our family hold its head high? Move out, stop embarrassing us." I closed my eyes, numbly listening. So in the following months, not a soul visited or took care of me, even for meals or bathing. The day I was discharged, I was a bony mess, my skin riddled with bedsores. Anna didn't know. She envied me marrying Gary and turning into a rich socialite overnight, and I envied my parents for giving her all their love and support. "You should take Anna to the capital. The big hospitals there can surely cure her." my mom urged. We're old, only you can look after her. You see, when something happens to Anna, everything's different. I said, partly unwilling, Mom, I'm already married. But she's your sister. My mom got up from the ground in fury, rattling off, without Anna, you wouldn't have such a big house. If she hadn't let you have Leo, would you have what you do today? You have to say yes, or else I'll. She looked around quickly, and then suddenly rushed into the house, grabbed a broom, and started hitting me with it. Ungrateful brat. Enough. Leo somehow came back in time, and he stopped my mom, pulling me into his arms. Looking at my bruises, he suppressed his anger and asked, what happened here? Seeing Leo, my mom's anger subsided a bit. You're just in time, Leo. Even if my daughter's married to you, Anna is her own sister. She looked at me smugly. After all, Leo originally wanted to marry Anna, so in her mind, she believed Leo still had Anna in his heart. I thought the same. Emily's sister should definitely be helped. Loosening his grip a bit, he gave me an apologetic look. Upon hearing that, my mom clapped her hands immediately. I said, Leo, you are a good man. It's all Anna's fault back then for being immature and insisting on marrying that cursed Gary. I hung my head low, feeling a strange sadness. Maybe I had loved him for a long time, so hearing that he still thought about Anna made me feel so awful. Just as I was about to walk away in disappointment, my feet left the ground. Leo had lifted me up, carefully placing me on the couch. He gently patted my head and turned back saying, but if she's trying to harm Emily, that's not gonna fly. I watched him speak to my mom, his tone calm but words sharp. If the police hadn't come in time, those thugs would have hurt Emily. But if she did nothing, why would they target her? As I see it, it's because flies don't bother an intact egg. Leo coldly looked at my mom. Yeah, if she did nothing, why would those thugs target Anna? The door slammed shut. I was surprised seeing Leo manage to upset my mom enough for her to leave and couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. But he seemed a bit awkward about it, tossing a small booklet my way before heading back to the room. Picking it up, I realized, oh my gosh, it was a bank book. 10 grand? It was a bank book with $100,000. I rushed into the room and asked, Leo, did you hit the jackpot or what? Even though I teased, I couldn't hide the smile on my face. I knew Leo was well off, but I didn't expect him to be this loaded. I sold our place back home. He looked at me calmly. Emily, this is all the money I've saved up over the years. If you want to move to the capital, let's just do it. I was shocked, but shouldn't you keep the house back home? You? He held my hand and said seriously, you might not believe this, but I had a dream. He candidly shared that in the dream, he married my sister Anna, revealing what truly happened in the past life. That's when I learned the truth behind his bankruptcy. Leo's ex-wife died in a car accident on their wedding day, and people started saying he was cursed. After Anna married him, she used the excuse of ensuring peace to force Leo to expand the feed mill continuously. She even went behind his back, replacing the factory's original machines with substandard ones from her lover, leading to a worker's death. Yes, in the second year of their marriage, Anna cheated on him. To please her lover, she went so far as to embezzle marital assets and trade away company secrets. By the time Leo found out, he had already lost an arm trying to save a worker from those machines during the accident. While hospitalized, Anna poisoned his throat, leaving him to fend off wild dogs on a mountain. His shoulders trembled slightly as he finished. I stepped forward, hugging him, as the savings book in my hand seemed to burn. So ever since Anna claimed he was bankrupt, Leo had been left on that desolate mountain. I clenched my fist tightly. The night before we moved to the provincial city, I heard Anna had woken up. In her hospital bed, she screamed incoherently, pulling out tubes like a madwoman while my mom cried beside her, trying to stop her. Anna, don't scare Mom like this. Anna choked on her screams, scratching at her neck in pain. The moment she saw me, her eyes filled with hatred. But nobody could understand her words, the doctors said she had been tortured too badly that night. Whatever was stuffed down her throat had torn her esophagus, vocal cords, and parts of her respiratory tract. Now, she was permanently mute. Seeing me come in, my mom was furious, but upon seeing Leo behind me, she left with a heavy sigh. After all, Anna's medical bills these days were paid by Leo, who I had asked to settle them. Anna continued flailing and shouting but suddenly quieted when Leo left. The room was filled with only her heavy breathing. She began crying softly, filled with suppressed agony, every tube a result of her karma, all because of Leo. Seeing the room just being me and her, I stepped towards one of the machines. She seemed to guess my intention, trying to signal for help. "It's useless," I hinted at the various machines connecting her tubes. "This room is soundproof, just for you." She shook her head in panic, and I couldn't help but laugh. Playing the part of a tragic martyr earlier, now faced with real danger, she finally felt scared. "From now on, answer my questions," I said, "understood?" She still feigned ignorance. I knew she was playing dumb, so I reached to strike the machine. Finally panicked, she gestured her agreement. "You before?" But just as I was about to ask, there was a rustling noise outside the door. So, I switched up my question, was all this Mark's idea? Anna was startled. She almost nodded, ready to deflect the blame, but then quickly shook her head, like she'd remembered something. "So it was all his plan, and you're just a victim too?" I looked at her with a smirk. "Is this what you told the cops?" She was dumbfounded again, shaking her head repeatedly, eyes full of confusion. She had just woken up, no chance yet to see the cops. I stared at her while stepping back towards the door. "All right, I get it. It's all Mark's doing. What a piece of work. If he doesn't get the death sentence, he'll spend the next 20 years in the slammer for sure." She was completely stumped, not understanding why I was being sarcastic. With my hand on the doorknob, I suddenly turned back. "You'll testify in court, right?" Seeing my sly smile, Anna finally caught on, her voice hoarse, wanting to say no. But her throat decided to give out, all those tubes in her making any movement painful. She could only watch as I exaggeratedly called out to the door, "No worries, we'll make sure Mark doesn't see daylight again." Sure enough, as soon as I opened the door, a figure tumbled in. "Mark." Ignoring Anna's terrified expression, I shut the door on Mark's menacing glare. On moving day, the police showed up. Turns out, after I left, Mark strangled Anna to death out of fear of getting caught up in it all. Then, while he was home trying to gather cash for an escape, Gary tried to stop him, and they got into it. In a scuffle, Mark accidentally pushed Gary off the balcony. It was just Gary's luck, or lack of, that the carport below was under construction. He wasn't as lucky as I was in a previous life. He fell into a concrete mixer, ending up in pieces. By the time the police arrived, Mark was already out of his mind, trying to piece his brother back together with the mix of flesh and cement. I regretted it so bad. I should have insisted Anna marry Leo back then. Now his factory's all fancy and up in the capital. At the funeral, my mom was going on, trying to put a positive spin on things for her long-gone daughter. Dad looked like he had something to add until he caught sight of me. "How dare you show up here? Did you say something to Mark? Why else would he kill Anna right after you left? Murderer. Bring my daughter back." With that, everyone's eyes turned towards me. Leo was about to step in, but I stopped him, letting my dad drag me by the hair to Anna's body. Look at what happened to your sister." So pissed, he kicked my leg, trying to force me to kneel before Anna. Instead, I couldn't help but laugh. Looking at his flushed face, I asked, almost mournfully, "Anna's your daughter, but am I not?" "Of course not." He blurted out, then quickly shut up. I got up, rubbing my sore scalp, and handed him a piece of paper. As soon as my mom saw it, she turned completely pale and instinctively reached for it. Leo stopped her, making her curse at me in frustration. "Emily, you ungrateful brat. What are you up to?" I waved a hand at her. "No worries, it's just my adoption papers." Once she heard that, she visibly relaxed, though she kept ranting to cover her embarrassment. "This here, it's Anna and Dad's paternity test." As I ripped it open in front of my mom, an old medical record slipped out. "Oh, and there's Dad's medical history too." Dad looked over puzzled, taking the paternity test from my hand. The test showed a less than 0.001% chance of Anna being my dad's biological daughter. She wasn't his at all. Dad looked thunderstruck. Since he and Mom never had kids, he'd adopted me from an orphanage when I was under a year old. But the next year, Mom was pregnant with Anna. Wow, what a huge betrayal. Dad fumed, ready to go after Mom, but I stopped him. "Dad, shouldn't you check your medical record?" "Check for what? I'm not sick," he shouted as he went for Mom. "You cheating." Patient Daniel, 52, diagnosed with chronic lead poisoning. I read aloud from the medical report, which Mom had hidden from Dad after his checkup. "Dad, seriously, take a look. Seems your life partner wants to slowly poison you to death." Mom's screams melded with Dad's curses, merging with the somber funeral music. Watching the chaos unfold, I hooked my arm through Leo's, and we left for a brighter future in the capital.